There are a few non-members also here, and there are a few CPG members are here. So for the non-members, I want to introduce very briefly about Corporate Pakistan Group. This is actually a virtual group. When we started this group in May 2015, this is a group of around 234 individuals from different backgrounds. And this is not only anymore a virtual group, but we are hosting several dialogues, dinners, networking lunches, and several other activities under the platform of Corporate Pakistan Group. Last month we hosted a Qawmi Mushaira in Karachi at Mohata Palace and attended by around 1,500 guests from different walks of life. So this is our first inaugural meeting of Corporate Pakistan Talks, and our plan is to host 4 meetings each in Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad in 2018. I will request our CPG member, Saqib Ahmed, he is the country director for SAP in Pakistan, for the welcome address. Saqib, please.
Thank you very much, Asper, and thank you very much everybody to be part of the CPD talks over here. As Asper mentioned, it's a new initiative that we have started, and that's where we are trying to get all the people with the same thought process that we carry around about the digital economy, about the different progresses that is happening all across the world in terms of the technology forefront, and also how it impacts in Pakistan as well. This is our inaugural session. Our main aim is to continue with the 4 meetings that we have decided in the overall in the year of 2018, and we will be taking all the inputs from all you guys as well, and as we sit together on the back end and start working on the different topics that are required to be covered during the course of this year as well. I welcome you all on behalf of the CPD Islamabad Membership Committee, and I hope that this forum and this event will continue and will give the right output to all the guests that are present over here. Thank you very much.
To our very dear members, Senator Mushaira Hussain Sayyid Sahab, he's here. Please stand for the recognition. Thank you very much. And very dear guest, Dr. Shazri Ali, he's the member National Assembly. She's a member National Assembly. And she is also a member of CPD. A very dear friend and chairman board of investment, Mr. Naeem Zamidar. He is also the founding member of Corporate Pakistan Group. I'm especially grateful to Telenor Pakistan and the CEO Irfan Wahab and the managing committee of Telenor for hosting this event on behalf of Corporate Pakistan Group. And my request to Irfan to please review it.
Dear friends, distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum. Very warm welcome to Telenor. It's really indeed an honor. I'm really happy to see full room here. This is not just a new campus where we just moved a few weeks back. We see this as a source of inspiration, transformation, not just for Telenor, but for the broader society. So this is the arena which we have created, where we intend to actually bring people together, and today's talk is one such example. That let's build a platform where people can come together and debate on topics of importance, especially linked to technology, because we believe, being one of the leading technology provider, that as part of the 4th industrial revolution, technology is gonna transforming every aspect of our lives going forward. Telenor being the telecom service provider, we've been building connectivity for last 12 years, ever since we entered in Pakistan. We've been rolling out our networks. It took us about 12 years or 10 years to roll out 2G network to about 80% of Pakistan. It took us 3 years to roll out 3G services, but only in last 1 year, since the award of 4G, we have covered 33% of our network. And we intend to actually expedite this. So inshallah, by end of this year, we will have 80% coverage of 4G throughout Pakistan. So that's like building railroads for the 4th industrial revolution, which is all about connectivity and building services on top of it. And today's talk is also about leadership in the digital economy. And that digital economy is actually touching across various aspects of our key economic sectors, whether it's financial services, Easy Paisa being one such great example, which we're very proud of, being, globally second largest mobile money service, which is, as we close 2017, our customers have moved close to $12 billion, which is 4% of Pakistan GDP, only on EasyPass's platform. That's the power of digitization. That's the power of empowering people, giving them tools and possibilities to actually change their world, change their lives, change their businesses. The other example which I would like to mention here is our services linked to agriculture. Agriculture is another sector of Pakistan where we are lagging behind, even in the regional markets, in the regional context, where our yields per hectare are far behind our neighbors. And the only way we can actually change that is by technological intervention. So we launched this Kushal Zimedar service about 18 months ago, and now we're serving over 4 million farmers, giving them access to information, because everyone has, at least the affluent farmers all have smartphones, but they were not using it for productivity enhancement. They were just using it for entertainment and looking at some video clips. Just by giving them that tool and enabling them with the information, access to market prices where they can get better yields, by transforming our 10,000 towers with the sensors which can provide weather information which is a lot more accurate, by giving them data, which is extremely important. Data going to be the next oil for the future century. We and some of our customers are now saying that the productivity within the 2 crop cycle has gone up by 15 to 20%. Imagine 4 million families are better off, even by 10 to 15%, more income which they can spend on, for example, education of their kids. So these are some examples of how technology can transform key sectors of our society. We believe that the next industrial revolution is about building those services, empowering our society, which is our vision as well. And I'm really delighted to welcome all of you today so that we can start the dialogue. I'm extremely happy to see a lot of distinguished friends, CPGNs, and thanks to us for creating this forum. Not just having events which are sort of spread over 3-4 events a year, but these talks can provide the platform where we can have this dialogue more frequently. And Telenor would like to be at center of this. This beautiful campus, we would like to actually transform this into a meeting place for like-minded people where issues can be discussed. Not just for young startups, where we have built a beautiful startup garage. We have built a prototype labs for them to come and experiment. We have created arenas where we are providing them mentoring, but also for senior leaders to come and discuss and exchange views. So with these words, again, very warm welcome. I would like to actually encourage you after the talk to take some time out and have a tour of the campus. You will see that this is sort of state-of-the-art, not just a very green, eco-friendly campus, but also the way it is designed, the way it is built. It has many possibilities actually for innovation, for transformation, for dialogue, and for bringing people together to collaborate and discuss issues which you're facing as a society. So thank you, and I hand over to Viola for
Thank you, Irfan. A very warm welcome from my side as well. And I would like to congratulate Asfar and the entire team of CPG for being able to host all of you, and thank you for Telenor for hosting all of us. So it's my pleasure to introduce Stephen Brobst. He's here with us, an absolute expert. I was myself really dazzled when I was looking at his profile today. So just to share with you what Stephen does and what he's about. He's the Chief Technology Officer for Teradata and helps businesses to implement business technology intelligence. He is, of course, an expert in data warehousing. He has led 3 startups in data warehousing, database management, and e-business platform, and only successfully sold or IPO'd these 2 IBM, NCR, and of course IPO'd at NASDAQ. He's been teaching us at Boston University, MIT, Stanford, UC Berkeley, and the list goes on. He was appointed in the first term of President Obama for President's Advisory Council on Science and Tech. And under this initiative, he co-authored the Designing Digital Future report. He was number 4 in 2014 among US CTOs, only behind Amazon, Tesla, and Intel. He's been co-authoring and authoring many papers, many research reports, and many books. He's co-authored data warehousing for data management, and I believe he's now writing active data warehousing. This is one of his books. So very welcome, Stephen.
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for being here today. So this topic of leadership and digital transformation, when people see someone with my title, Chief Technology Officer, coming to the stage, they think we're going to talk a lot about the technology. Technology is the easy part. We're not going to talk about technology. The hard part is cultural change and organizational change. Thinking differently about what your organizations are trying to achieve. The technology will be there to help you do that. We're going to focus on how do you need to think differently. And part of my goal here is to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Because if I'm not making you feel uncomfortable, then we're not doing transformation, right? And so what I'm going to do is talk about sort of how we need to think differently and evolve our thinking in this digital economy, right? We just heard this reference to, you know, data is the oil of the 21st century. Data is way better than oil. When you consume it, it's still there to create more value after you're done. Oil, you burn it and you're done, right? Data is way better, right? And so we need to figure out how to exploit maximum value from that data. And it's not doing the same stuff that we've been doing better, it's doing things differently. In Silicon Valley, we have a saying, in the 21st century, all businesses either are data businesses, will be data businesses, or will be extinct. Those are the only 3 choices. And I know people say, yeah, you Silicon Valley people from California, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, we understand those are all data businesses, but we're a bank, or we're a telecommunications company or manufacturing company. This doesn't apply to us. You are confused. It applies to all industries. This is the cultural change, the thinking change that we have to go to. So one of the organizations that I work with is a manufacturing organization in the Netherlands, Philips Electronics. Probably most of you have heard of them. They've been around for over 100 years, a rich history of innovation and creating things and so on. And they understand this. They said, look, we cannot be competitive as a traditional manufacturer. It's not the way it's going to work in the future. 3D printing, commoditization of manufacturing, offshore, it's not a viable business in the long term. We got to figure out how to become a data business. How does a manufacturing business become a data business? Well, I'm going to give you one simple example. This is a public example, so I'm allowed to talk about it. But they've got lots of examples in the works and in the pipeline and so on. It's a very simple example. An electric toothbrush. An electric toothbrush is a very boring product, right? A customer will buy a new electric toothbrush once every 5 to 7 years, they hope. You change the brushes every 6 months, we hope, right? But Philips doesn't even know who the customer is. They sell to Walmart, and then Walmart sells to the real customer. Philips' customer is Walmart. It's not the consumer. So they need to start thinking differently, right? And they have started thinking differently. The electric toothbrushes that they now sell are part of the IoT, Internet of Things. They're sensor enabled, and when you're brushing your teeth, it's capturing your toothbrushing habits, putting them into a data repository, into the cloud, and then we can analyze it and give you a scorecard of how well are you brushing your teeth. Yeah? Now think about the implications of this, right? You bought the toothbrush from Walmart once every 5 to 7 years, but every day you're going to have a relationship directly with Philips now. The value added is not the manufacturing of the device. The value added is the data and the provision of the data and the algorithms that I'm going to give you for understanding your teeth brushing habits. Right? Many of you probably have kids. You say, Johnny, did you brush your teeth before you're going to bed? You don't have to ask anymore. You pull down the scorecard on your iPad and say, Johnny, get it back up there and brush your teeth again. Right? Now this data, of course, you need to maintain the privacy and the security of the data. This data is accessed only by me if it's my toothbrushing data. I can choose to share it with my dentist, but that's my choice. Right? Philips went into a joint venture relationship with a healthcare insurance company in South Africa. So the healthcare insurance company, if you brush your teeth at least twice a day, at least 2 minutes each time, they will give you 50 e-bucks. These are basically points for frequent brushing. And you can take the e-bucks and you can use it to lower your healthcare premium, or what people really do is buy themselves a present. And it encourages good dental hygiene, and dental hygiene is an early indicator of good health. So they're willing to give up some premium and so on, and this joint venture, right? Everybody's winning. The consumer's winning. The ones that behave well are getting rewarded for good behavior. The healthcare insurance is getting lower cost of delivering healthcare because there are fewer people that have poor dental hygiene. And Philips has a direct consumer relationship. Is this a different model than what they had before? Absolutely. They are now in the data business. It's a different business. Right? We're in one of the world's greatest telecommunications company today, Telenor, globally. Right? Telecommunications companies think that they are in the business, traditionally, of delivering voice and data services to the consumers and so on. Most telecommunications companies are confused. That's not the business that they're in anymore. That's the 20th century business. The 21st century business is very different. So when we look at mobile telecommunications, and I'll use Pakistan as an example because it's one of the most competitive marketplaces in the world, is right here. People walking around with phones with 3 SIM cards and toggling between them to see who gets the best deal at which hour of the day and which day of the week and so on. It's incredible, right? And we, as an industry, telecommunications industry, we have taught consumers that the subscription, whether you do prepaid or postpaid, I don't care, it's coming down over time. I will pay less for my data and voice services over time. Right? At the same time, nobody under the age of 30 cares about voice. It's all about the data, and the demand for data is growing exponentially. That demand for data, this translates to costs for network infrastructure. Rolling out 4G network infrastructure to 80% coverage of packets, this is money that you have to invest, not to mention the cost of the 4G licenses and all that kind of stuff. This is all very heavy fixed cost investment. So this leads to a very perverse economic. The cost is high fixed cost, but once the network is there, the variable cost to bring a subscriber on, it's very small. So what do? We kill each other, bringing more people to our network, right? And so we train the subscriber that cost is going down. In Austria, which is a much smaller country than Pakistan, the leading player, A1, Austrian Telecom, they said, look, this is unsustainable because subscription revenue is coming down like this and network cost is going down up like this, and to the left of this intersection point is a very bad business model, right? Because we're losing money in the long term. And so we can't do that anymore. We need to hold the ground, keep the subscription revenue at least flat. Okay, we're not going to make it go up, but at least flat. And all the other guys jumped in and said, they're keeping it flat. We're going to undercut them. We're going to take market share away. And what did they do? Cut their price. It's the economics of the industry that forces this. Right? So the current model of telecommunications, if we think in the old way, is unsustainable. So what does that mean? there are some interesting disruptors in the marketplace. One of the large providers we work with was a latecomer. They came into the marketplace and they said, we're coming into the marketplace and we are going to make voice free. We are going to make data free. And the other players in the market say, are you crazy? What are you doing? You're destroying the business model. I said, no, no, no. You guys were already destroying the business model. All we did was roll the clock ahead a couple of years. And the fact that you're worried about it means you weren't ready for the reality of what you're already doing to yourself. And so we have another saying in Silicon Valley. If the product or service is free, you are the product. Isn't it nice that Google gives you free search, free mapping, free email, free translation? Is Google an altruistic nonprofit organization dedicated to the betterment of quality of life of all of humanity? Absolutely not. Silicon Valley is a capitalist cesspool, right? They make a lot of money doing this very virtuous giving things away for free. Why? Because you are the product. They have understood that the value of the data that you are giving them by using these tools is worth more than what you'd be willing to pay for the search or the mapping and so on. Right? And so this telecommunications provider, they made the same decision. The value of the data is higher than what you'd be willing to pay for the service, especially when you look at the subscription revenue going like this. Right? Now, they actually learned a bit of a painful lesson because giving data away for free is actually not a great idea because it's people, when something is free, they abuse it. It's hard to abuse voice because you can only talk so much, but data you can definitely abuse. So they eventually took a step back and made the data not free, but 1/3 the price of everybody else in the marketplace. So it wasn't free, but it's still below cost. Right? That allowed them to sort of get visibility to what people are doing on the network, but eliminated a lot of the abuse. Right? In the US, there was a law passed in 2017 that explicitly allows the large telecommunications players, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and Sprint are the ones that matter, right, to exploit the data on their network. In other words, to mine the value. If Google is allowed to do it, the telecommunications providers are allowed to do it. And they are transforming their business models. Verizon bought Yahoo. Yahoo, that's not a telecommunications provider. No, but Yahoo actually has technology to help exploit data, right? AT&T bought DirecTV, right? And so they're figuring out how to get more data, more understanding of consumers, and figuring out how to monetize the data. If I look at Verizon, who's a long-time Teradata customer, one of the things that they're investing the most in is figuring out how to create value from the data. Right? So think about this, and we could go on. We could spend the whole hour just talking about examples of people transforming their business in this way. Right? It's a different business. Right? We're now giving away voice and data for free just so we can get your sort of usage patterns. Right? That's a different business than you would have thought of in telecommunications 10 years ago, certainly. Right? So now once we've got the data, we've got to do something with it. In the end, nobody cares about the data. What are you going to do with that data? We need to understand the behaviors of consumers. We need to be able to do microsegmentation. We need to understand not just what they buy, but every interaction that leads up to the buy, the customer journey to everything that they do. Right? We need to understand the data from all sources, from social media sources, from the network sources. We need to understand what is the next best offer to make to this consumer right now so that they take the behavior that we're interested in them taking, that it's good for them and it's good for us. Right? And we need to do it in real time. So this idea of building a data warehouse for business intelligence to deliver a report about what happened yesterday, this is so boring. This is like driving a car, looking in the rearview mirror, looking backwards. What happens if you drive a car and you spend all your time looking in the rearview mirror? crash. I hope what you're doing is you're looking forward, right? You're looking to see what's going to happen so you can take action before it happens. Intervention action, preventive action, right? So we need to think in more real time when we're using the data. If I were to oversimplify the world that we're trying to create here, there's really 6 steps through how to monetize the data. First is get a single view of the customer. And by the way, customer might be a consumer individual. Customer might also be a B2B environment. So when I say customer, the general view of customer. 360-degree view of customer. I want to know how they behave, all of the customer interactions on each of my channels, all of the product relationships, everything about that customer and their behavior. And then what I want to do is micro-segment. Now, when I say segmentation, old-style segmentation is, you know, 6 marketing people sit around a table and they discuss, oh, so how should we segment the customers? Well, let's segment by income and age and lifestyle and this kind of stuff. And they'll come up with 12 segments. And they'll, based on the feeling in their stomach, well, the age range between 20 and 25, 26, how did they come up with those numbers? Just pulled them out of their ear, right? And this is not the way that it's going to work. Believe me, the leaders, the people like eBay and Amazon and Google, they have thousands of segments. Capital One has thousands of segments. And believe me, those are not created by humans. These are created by machine learning algorithms that are constantly learning and refining how to sort of put people in different segments and then targeting to those individual people offers that make sense to them, right? So this microsegmentation is very important. So we're analyzing each of those customers in the context of their segments. We're looking at their behaviors, and then we are figuring out how to improve that customer experience on all channels, with all products, and so on. And we have to figure out what is the killer app. What is going to be the thing that brings the customer closer to us? Right? So the electric toothbrush with the scorecard of the toothbrushing habit, that was one of the killer apps that came out of this work that was done by Philips Electronics. I'm going to give you another killer app a little bit later from the utilities industry. And I'm going to use the utilities industry because, at least in the US, we think of utilities as a very, I'll say, not innovative industry. Because they're basically government-granted monopolies because of economies of scale and so on. And so when you're a monopoly, you don't have to innovate at all. But in fact, all industries have to innovate. All industries have to transform. So we'll come back to that example a little bit later on. I want you to be thinking about what is your killer app? What is the thing that you're going to do with the data that differentiates you and creates competitive advantage for you, right? And we're going to do it in real time. And we're going to capture the outcomes. We're going to feed it into our machine learning algorithms, and we're going to get better and smarter on a continuous basis, right? Machine learning, deep learning, these are technologies that are going to make a huge difference in how you use your data. If you're manually generating reports and looking at reports and so on, you have not made the transformation, right? We're going to have self-learning algorithms. I hesitate to use the overused buzzword of artificial intelligence, but deep learning is a subset of AI that is very important in the space that we're talking about here. No matter what your function is, if you're doing risk analytics, it's great that you get a report of how much fraud I had last week. But wouldn't it be better to identify the pattern of fraud as it's happening and prevent the fraud? Right? If cybersecurity is a huge issue in society in general, across every industry. Right? There are patterns that we can see as they're emerging that allow us to detect and intervene before the damage is done. Right? The cybersecurity, I don't know how many people have been sort of reading the news lines today, but it just got publicly announced that there is a bug in the Intel chipset that has been around for some time that's now been surfaced that creates a vulnerability so that the data that you're using on any Intel-based computer, which is basically what we all use, we're vulnerable. Right? Now, there are fixes being applied as we speak. On I think, January 9th, Microsoft Azure is going to take a system-wide reboot, and the whole cloud is going to reboot itself, install a patch, and then performance is going to go down by 20%. Right? So it's, you know, cybersecurity is a big deal, right? And we need to be able to use the analytics to create a more secure environment, right? We need to use the data for better operational efficiency. Whether we're running an airline or a bank or a telecommunications company, getting that data, analyzing the data, figuring out what to do before bad things happen to create good outcomes. Good outcomes for customers, good outcome for manufacturing quality, good outcomes for whatever it is that we're doing. Right? Customer experience for many of us is at the top of the list for retaining and acquiring high-value customers. I'm going to give you some examples of the use of recommendation engine technology, right? Using these techniques that make huge difference. Right? The three examples that I'm going to give are not in traditional industries. And one of the things I want to warn you about is that a lot of times we tend to benchmark ourselves against our peers. So I was working with a bank in Singapore, and they wanted to sort of rethink the digital experience. And some of the folks in the marketing say, yeah, and when we think we should do a benchmark. You know, what are the best of breed banks doing around digital experience and banking and so on? And one of the persons at the table, one of the people at the bank, very smart guy, he said, no. Why would we benchmark against the best of breed banks? That's, you know, if we're better than all of them, we're the queen of the pigs, right? Banking does not set the standard for digital experience anywhere in the world. We should be benchmarking against, you know, eBay and LinkedIn and Amazon and, you know, the kings of digital experience, not the pigs of digital experience, right? So don't benchmark just against yourselves in your own industry. Open the door wider, and it's going to be very unfair, and you're going to feel very bad about yourself. But you're not going to go through a transformation if you just say, well, incrementally I'm going to prove better than the bank that's next door to me. That's no good, right? Do international benchmarking, not necessarily within your industry. That's my challenge to you, right? So I'm going to give you three examples here, all companies that I've worked with, right? First is Amazon. Amazon's recommendation engine, which is based on not just your buying patterns, but your browsing patterns, the interactions below the level of transactions, all your search patterns and so on. In certain product categories, it accounts for nearly 1/3 of their sales. In other words, if the recommendation engine wasn't there, their sales would go down by 1/3. That's a pretty good lift, right? And by the way, Amazon allows you to look at the data that they are using in the recommendation. Said, you know, that book, that was a present for my brother. I don't really read that author. Take it out of your algorithm. So they give the consumer transparency to what data they're using. The consumer can even say, exclude that data and include this data. Pretty interesting, right? Very innovative. Netflix, which I know is being introduced kind of as we speak into this marketplace, and you know, some pretty interesting things going on with Netflix right now. Their model is very interesting. They are a subscription-based business. If there are no new movies or documentaries that you want to watch, then you stop paying. So it's very important to them that they are presenting you new stuff, right? Their recommendation engine accounts for 75% of the content viewed on Netflix. That is huge. Think about the value of of that recommendation engine to a subscription-based business. And by the way, if the recommendation engine says, we recommend that you watch the latest Star Wars movie, this is a useless recommendation. Because anybody who's interested in Star Wars, they already know about the movie. They don't need a recommendation engine to tell them. And someone who's not interested in Star Wars, they also know about the movie, and they're not going to watch it anyway, even if you recommend it. So a good recommendation engine recommends a movie that you never even heard of, and that you like it when you watch it. If I recommend a movie you never heard of, and you don't like it, and I do that a couple of times, you're going to stop listening to my recommendations. So it has to be a movie you're going to like. And when they make this kind of recommendation, a movie that I'm going to like and that nobody's ever heard of, I'm going to come the king, because I'm going to say at the next party I go to my friends, you know, I saw this great movie, you never heard of it, and now I'm the well-educated, movie aficionado, and I'm the king, right? So these recommendations are very powerful, not only to get me to watch, but if it's an unknown thing, I get to become the expert. And there's another very interesting dynamic. If you watch a Star Wars movie on Netflix, the royalties that they have to pay to Lucasfilms, it's a big chunk of money, right? If the recommendation engine gets you to watch some obscure film made in a basement in Paris, that film house is happy that anybody's even watching their film. The royalties are basically zero. This is great for Netflix. Netflix doesn't want to share the revenue with, Lucasfilms. They'd much rather give a couple of cents on the dollar to, some art house in Paris. So a good recommendation engine is actually very, very sophisticated in terms of what it's doing for your business. Right? And Netflix did something very interesting. They held a contest for $1 million. Who could build a recommendation engine that would beat the Netflix recommendation engine? They took their data, they anonymized it so you couldn't see, your brother Joe was watching this movie. They anonymized it, they took viewing behavior and a bunch of other data. They published it openly. And there were hundreds of teams that competed for 18 months to develop the best recommendation engine possible. By the way, most of them did not beat the existing Netflix recommendation engine, because Netflix is pretty good already. But there were a few who did. And the winning team, it actually turns out their algorithm was so sophisticated, and there was no rule about how complicated the math could be. It was so complicated it actually wasn't practical to execute in real time. But they were able to take some of the ideas and embed them in their recommendation engine, and they improved the recommendation engine, and that was worth $1 million. $1 million seems like a lot of money, but in Silicon Valley, $1 million is basically 5 data scientists for 1 year. Not just the salary, but all the compute and the algorithms and the software license and all the stuff you have to pay for those data licenses, for those data scientists, right? So this was a very, very good investment. LinkedIn, my last example here. The recommendation engine they have for people you may know accounts for more than 50% of the connections made on LinkedIn. And there's an interesting dynamic on LinkedIn. They're a longtime Teradata customer, and it surprised me when I saw this number, right? That LinkedIn, the average time on LinkedIn is 17 minutes, and 40% check in daily. It's pretty interesting, right? Now, I can actually relate to this because it's, if I'm on a boring conference call, I must admit that sometimes what I'll do is I'll bring in LinkedIn and I'll just go to the recommendation and say, can LinkedIn find somebody interesting that I want to talk to, right? That I want to be connected to. And it's actually, the recommendation engine is very good at finding people that I wouldn't have found myself. Right? It's a fun kind of game when you're bored on a conference call. I won't tell your boss that you did that if you won't tell on me. In order to make these things happen, new thinking is required. And one of the hints that I gave you already is turning data into products. Your product is not the toothbrush. The product is the data created by the toothbrush. The product is not the voice call or the access to data services. It's actually the data created by the use of those services, right? Then you have to think about how you're going to use that data to create the killer apps, right? So we have talked a long time in the industry about the concept of business intelligence. Put the data into the hands of employees of your company with good tools, and they will get access to that data and create business intelligence. I want to challenge you to go one step further into the concept of consumer intelligence. In other words, take the value chain. Your internal employees are part of the value chain. Push it further out to your customers. What Philips did is consumer intelligence. They're taking the data generated by the thing that they manufacture, and they're giving it all the way back to the consumer. Wells Fargo Bank and Bank of Shanghai and Lloyd's Banking Group, they've done the same thing. They take the data in their data warehouse, and then they give tools to their retail banking customers to access the data and do analysis for better personal financial decision making. And it turns out that once they start using the tool, those customers are very sticky. They never leave. And once you're using those tools to do analysis, I want to get the complete view of my financial picture. And so they start consolidating the products under the Wells Fargo umbrella, and I get a bigger share of wallet and more product relationships, and that leads to better retention. It's a virtuous circle, right? But they've turned the data into a product. It's a very different way of thinking about things, because in the past, we made that data warehouse available to our internal employees for making good risk decisions and marketing decisions and so on. But now I'm going to make it available to my retail banking customers so they can make better personal financial decisions. Different way of thinking. Right? And these days, the ability to access data, everybody's got it in their hand. Right? Everybody's got a mobile device. Like there was a study done that over 90% of people in the US have their mobile phone within arm's reach 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. I know your sleeping habits. You either sleep with it under your pillow or on the table right next to the bed. Right? And most people, the first thing they do when they get up in the morning, it's not brush their teeth, go to the toilet, it's check their messages. Right? And so these things have become part of them. Right? And these things are access to data. And they provide a platform for deploying the killer apps to everybody, right, within the digital economy. So here's my example from the utility company, Southern California Edison. So SCE covers basically Los Angeles, kind of north of San Diego and south of Santa Barbara, if you know anything about the geography of California. And they spent over $1.6 billion smart metering every residential home in their coverage area. Right? So a smart meter allows you to collect data on a continuous real-time basis on how energy is being consumed from each home. Right? When I was a kid growing up in California, there was someone who was a meter man, and he would go around with a logbook and paper, and he would go and look on a meter on the side of the house, and he would write it down, and he'd go to the next house and write it down. At the end of the day, he'd turn in the logbook, data entry, and a bill gets generated. It's very inefficient. Right? A lot of dog bites, a lot of hospital bills. And they eventually replaced that with near-field communication, where they drove a truck up and down each street, and they sort of downloaded with near-field communication technology, but it's still very expensive. And you still basically get a monthly summary of the energy consumed. Right? Now, the problem is, in California, and I know you have this problem here too, especially in Karachi, right? There's not enough energy to go around in the middle of the summer, in the middle of the week, in the middle of a hot day. Because everybody stays at home, they turn on their air conditioner, they're watching their big screen television, they're doing their laundry, they're consuming lots of energy, and there's not enough. So what do you have to do? The dreaded load shedding. Right? We're going to take these 10 square blocks and we're going to turn off all the energy just for a short amount of time, and then we're going to move it to another 10 blocks and then move it around. And consumers get really unhappy with this. You know, they're watching the television, and right during the most important kiss, screen goes blank. And when the energy comes back on, all my clocks are flashing. I have to reset them. I'm very annoyed. I'm very annoyed. And consumers complain, say, you should build a bigger power plant. And the CFO says, I don't think so. Because the peak is more than double the average use, so why should I build for the peak? This is really stupid. For a couple of days a year, I'm not going to make that kind of investment. So what do in California? They beg. Please don't do your laundry in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day, in a hot summer day. Do it on the weekend, do it at night, and so on. Begging works on some people. They take out ads on television and newspaper and so on. Right? The other thing they do is guilt. In California, we're very eco-friendly, very green. And so we say, you know, you are not green if you don't do your laundry at night and on the weekend. And if you're not green, you're a bad person. And you don't want to be a bad person, so don't do your laundry in the middle of the week. And that works on some people, especially the people in LA. Right? But there's another kind of green that works much better. Pricing. Because now we can actually see the utilization on a minute-by-minute, hour-by-hour basis, and we can price the energy differently in the middle of the day and in the middle of the night. And so Southern California Edison has a whole bunch of really smart econometrics people building models for what's called price elasticity to figure out, essentially to do spot pricing, to say, you know, if I lower the price by this much, or if I raise the price by this, how does demand change? And what I want to do is I want to raise the price enough to defer demand but not eliminate demand. So if I raise the price a little bit, the laundry's still dirty, so you still have to do it, but you're going to do it on the weekend or at night. But if I raise the price too much, then I would rather sweat than pay your air conditioning bill. And on the weekend, I'm not going to run my air conditioner twice as cold. No. So that's lost demand. So these econometric people spend a lot of time figuring out lost demand versus deferred demand. This is all BI. And it's enabled by this sensor data captured from these smart meters. But Southern California Edison went one step further. They say, well, we've got all this data, and we've got a relationship with our consumers, and it's not a great relationship. We send them a bill once a month. They don't usually look forward to it. And they call to complain when there's no power. We got no good relationship. We only have bad relationships. They created an API to access the data. Any consumer can access the data, and they can get their personal consumption patterns. Right? And it's on the same data warehouse infrastructure that all this fancy econometric stuff is being done. So the incremental cost of data is zero because they already had all the data. And there's millions of people in Los Angeles, but they don't all access at the same time. And they're only accessing their data. I can't access my neighbor's data. I can only see my data. And so it's actually a relatively small amount of resources used to get that data, right? Very small compared to the econometric models built for price elasticity. So it's basically free. And these people, they then access the data. And this is a screenshot from the iPad of a friend of mine, just a normal, well, he's not really normal, he's a geek, but you know, a regular customer of Southern California Edison. He can monitor his energy consumption on a minute-by-minute basis, hour-by-hour basis, daily basis. He can do all kinds of stuff with it. This is just on his iPad. This isn't some fancy IT dashboard built by, no, this is just a tool for a consumer, right? And in California, we have a very sort of, this green-mindedness leads to this very interesting set of economics that in California, we have a lot of sun. So that means opportunity for solar power. The energy companies are required to buy energy back. If I generate it via solar power, they have to buy it at the same price that I pay for it. This is a really good deal. So my friend, he's got solar panels everywhere. Right? And he has this big yard. He's got two little girls. They do not get to play in the yard because there's solar panels everywhere. And he's generating energy, and his goal is I should not pay a nickel for energy because whatever I use at night, because solar panel is not so good at night, right? I should have generated enough energy during the day that it's basically free. Right? So he pays nothing for his energy bill. Right? And so he as a consumer, he can do this, right? And then he went kind of crazy. He starts, putting sensors on everything: noise pollution, air quality, temperature in the house. Do you know that a couple of years ago, Google bought a company called Nest? It's basically they create in-home sensors. Do you think Google is interested in being a sensor manufacturing company? No, of course not. The manufactured device is just a way to collect data, because it gives me more insight to your behaviors as a family and so on. So it's all about the data. Always remember that. Now, this project that I described in Southern California Edison, I was describing to the chief operating officer for a very large utility company. I'm not going to name them, but a very large utility company. And he said, this does not sound like a very good idea to me, because if I make my consumers smarter, they're going to use less energy, and then I'm going to have less revenue, and they're going to have to lay people off. This doesn't sound like a good idea. He's confused as to what his business is, right? So Southern California Edison, they're in the same situation this other CEO is, but what they did is they negotiated with the regulator and said, look, we're making our consumer smarter, so you, the regulator, you should allow us, because the price is controlled by the regulator. They do not set price. You should allow us to raise the price per unit. And we're going to give some of the money back to the consumer for being a good consumer and saving energy. But our profit shouldn't go down because we're making consumers smarter, right? I don't mind if the revenue goes down, but the profit should not go down, right? So basically, we share the savings. We get some of the savings, the consumer gets some of the savings, and the government, California in particular, has a goal to be less dependent on foreign sources of energy. So we're reducing dependence on foreign sources of energy. Everybody wins. By the way, the $1.6 billion, that was subsidized by the government, because it's part of this whole initiative to get smarter and digital across all industries, including government-regulated industries, right? And it is aligned to this goal of reducing dependence on foreign sources of energy. Right? So now I'm going to ask a question for you. I want you to think in your organizations, how do you make decisions? If a sentence starts with, based on my experience, the next things that come out of my my mouth will not be based on data. That's how a lot of organizations make decisions. Based on my experience, we should raise the price to this, or we should open a new marketplace here, and so on. Based on my experience is not data. Experience is not data. Experience is anecdotal. It's a very dangerous way to make decisions. So I want you to think about moving away from the art of decision making. Art of decision making is rubbing my stomach and throwing the dice, and based on my experience. That's the art of decision making. The science of decision making is get the data. Get the data and then use the data to make decisions. Right? Now, the problem is, in some organizations, the data doesn't exist. So at MIT, where I'm from, there's this term that we use called the hippo principle. Right? So these are hippos in the Nile River. I took that picture myself. And when there's no data, we use, for decision making, the hippo principle. Hippo is highest paid person's opinion. The highest paid person in the room, they get to make the decision based on their experience, the feeling in their stomach. Yeah? And by the way, you know what the worst thing about the hippo principle is? The highest paid person in the room is probably a consultant. And they don't even have to live with the decision afterwards. So, no hippo principle. I hate the hippo principle. Get rid of that. If you don't have the data, figure out a way to get the data. Make good decisions based on data. Right? So, we should figure out how, as organizations, we're going to gather the data. That might mean designing experiments. It might be instrumenting the homes that you are delivering energy to. Whatever you're doing, instrumentation to collect the data is very important. Right? If you have an online website for selling your product, are you collecting all the clicks and all the searches that lead up to the buying of that product? If you're not, then you have no visibility to what's really going on, right? So figure out how to get the data, and then figure out how to measure and how to develop champion challenger models so that you get continuous improvement. Try new things and see what works and what doesn't work on a continuous basis. Now, the hard part of this is not the technology. The hard part of it is, do you have the skill sets and do you have the organizational culture? Right? Let's start with organizational culture. The people in this room are the ones that set the culture of their organizations. Culture starts from the top down. Doesn't start from the bottom up. Right? And in many companies, there's a problem here. Because the people at the top, they came through the organization, and the C-levels very often did not have access to the kind of data and tools that are available today. They didn't exist. And so when some middle-level sort of, marketing or pricing or channel person comes to you and says, I need to, get some data and analyze the data and so on, and I need to make decisions about this and that, the C-level say, well, I didn't have that when I was in your job. Why do you need it? Are you not smart? Look where I am now. I didn't need data. Why do you need data? Why do we need to fund this? It's a lot of money. Right? So there's this gap, this chasm in culture that gets created because the new MBAs, they're all about the data. But the old C-levels, maybe not, right? And so we need to educate ourselves, because I'm really talking to you here, right? We need to educate ourselves to, the 21st century and using data to compete effectively. Whether you're in government, whether you're in industry, there's a cultural change that's happening. And to enable yourself, buying technology is easy. Invest in your people. That's the thing you really need to do. Invest in your people. Give them the skill sets to use the data, to do the analytic thinking, to build the machine learning algorithms, to analyze the data and so on. This is absolutely critical. Right? So there's this term, it was actually invented at LinkedIn, called the data scientist. A BI analyst is someone who uses the data to get the answer to a business question. A data scientist does not care about the answer to a business question. A data scientist is looking for new questions. It's like data R&D, right? And if you have a data-intensive initiative, a big data project, the data scientist is one of the most important roles, probably the most important role that you can have, right? So when you look at the skills of a data scientist, what are you looking for in this person? I would argue there are 6 things you're looking for. First of all, an innate sense of curiosity. A data scientist is actually a very annoying person. Have you ever taken a 2-year-old walking through the park? They always say, why? They're very annoying. They don't take anything you say at granted. They always want to know why. Show me the data. That's exactly the person I want on my team. They're annoying, but that's who I want on my team because they're going to ask the hard questions. A good data scientist has intuition and domain knowledge. Because data science is a lot about experimentation, having a hypothesis, testing the hypothesis, and so on. And if it takes you 99 hypotheses to get a piece of gold, that's not so good. 9 is better. And that has more to do with intuition and domain knowledge. I need them to be able to get the data. If the data doesn't exist, they need to be able to design an experiment. And they need to be able to analyze that using statistical tools, using data mining tools, using predictive models. And then we need to be able to communicate those ideas to a business stakeholder without using the term R squared. Right? In natural language, without technical statistical terms, can you communicate? Right? Very, very important. Now the reality is you will not find all of these things in any one person. So teams of people is very important. Diverse teams. Diversity in your data science team is very important. I want old people, I want young people, I want males, I want females, I want different universities, and I want to be able to take these people and put them together, and those differences between them create energy and create innovation, right? So think about innovation in your teams and diversity in those teams. There's going to be a culture clash. In Silicon Valley, we talked about the suits versus the shirts. So the suits over here, these are traditional IT people, right? I see a lot of suits in the room, right? And they have long-term vendor relationships. They're risk averse. They think of the enterprise. They use, waterfall development projects. Takes a long time to get anything done, but it always gets done, and it's very predictable. Now, what gets done at the end may or may not be what you wanted, but you're going to get it anyway, right? And these guys control the budget. They control the budget, right? Now, these guys over here, these are the shirts. In Silicon Valley, definitely nobody wears a suit and tie unless they're a lawyer, right? And we try to stay away from them, right? And these shirts, they are innovation. By the way, shoes are optional in Silicon Valley, right? So, the environment is very, very different. And these people, they get excited about open source. They get excited about agility. The suits think that hackers are a bad thing. The shirts think they're a good thing. Because hackers you have hackathons, you're sort of experimenting with the data. There's a big culture clash that happens here, right? Now, this is kind of like the parent, very responsible. This is like the teenager, very irresponsible, but innovation, right? We wouldn't have rock and roll music if there were no teenagers, right? So there's innovation and there's disruption and so on. Now, sometimes you need a bridge between them, because if the parents and the children aren't talking to each other, it's a problem, right? So there needs to be a bridge between them, right? And so building an environment where you can integrate and move from mode 2 innovation into mode 1 operationalization is very important. And program management plays a big role there. Right? So when you talk about innovation, there is, you want to manage innovation as a portfolio. Right? So 30% of your resources should be developing your core and making what you do better. But you're just going to get incremental improvement. Your probability of success is 90%, but the value is relatively small. 60% of your resources are creating new opportunities within your existing business. This is kind of pivoting. You keep one place in your comfort zone and you move the other foot somewhere new. You do new pricing strategy, new bundling, so on, but you got one foot pivoted, right? Your probability of success is 70%. Higher rate of failure, but much better returns as well. And then 10% space shots. Wild ideas, go try them, neither foot is pivoted, 90% chance of failure, but if you get a hit, it's really very valuable, right? So think about the investment in innovation as a portfolio. The last thing I wanted to leave you with is a small discussion of innovation and governance. We think of these things as opposites. Governance is rules and bureaucracy and slowing things down and saying no. Innovation is saying yes. Innovation is running fast. Innovation is no rules. There's a very interesting study that was done at MIT looking at the relationship between innovation and governance. And so I've kind of taken that research and customized a little bit, this 2x2 matrix. I've got low and high innovation and low and high governance. If you have low innovation and low governance, this is the loser quadrant. If you're not innovating and you're not governing, you are a loser. You will not be in business for very long. In the report, they were very polite. They called it the beginners. You can't sell consulting to people you call losers, but if you're in this quadrant long, you're a loser. Right? Now over here, cash cows, low innovation, high governance. Cash cow, this comes from Michael Porter's strategy work. It's a business that you don't invest very much in, but you take a lot out. Right? So, for example, in the US, I would call fixed line telecommunications cash cow business. We don't invest a lot, but we take a lot of money out. Right? When the phone rings in the house I grew up in, my mother goes running down the hallway and says, "Hello." My little sister says, "You are so weird. Why aren't you like a normal person? When the phone rings, you pick it up out of your pocket and you answer it. Why do you have to run down the hallway? Who invented this idea of a phone stuck to a wall? What a stupid idea. But my mother pays $50 a month to AT&T every month for the privilege of that phone stuck to a wall. She loves that phone stuck to a wall. And all her friends love their phone stuck to a wall. But that's a certain demographic that is not going to sustain as a marketplace because that generation isn't going to live forever. And my little sister is never going to have a fixed line phone, believe me. Right? So it's a cash cow business. And by the way, branch banking, same thing. Branch banking is cash cow business. Now, I was with the chief operating officer of a bank down in Latin America. He said, you Americans, digital transformation, why aren't you closing bank branches faster? Because it's a bad idea to close them too fast. Because if you close the bank branches, there are people still going to those branches, and they're going to defect. You have to use data to figure out which branches to close when. If you close the bank branch next to my grandmother, she's going to take all of her money and bring it somewhere else. So you better figure out how you're going to use the cash cow money to fund the next generation of digital customers. Because my grandmother has a lot more money than my little sister. You're building the future for my little sister, but my grandmother's funding it. Let the cash cows fund the digital future. Right? Now here, high innovation, low governance, we call this the fashionistas. These are largely technology people that are chasing new cool technology. Right? I sometimes compare IT people to 8-year-olds playing football. Not American football, real football. I know you don't really do football here, it's cricket and all that, but when you look at soccer and 8-year-olds playing soccer, you kick the ball, they all chase the ball in a big clump. You kick it again, they all chase the ball. No strategy, no passing, but they have a lot of fun. IT people are just like this. There's cloud computing. Everybody chasing cloud computing. We don't know why, but everybody else is doing it. There's Hadoop. Let's go chase Hadoop. Right? There's big data. Let's go chase big data. Do you have a strategy? Do you have a business product owner who's driving this? If you don't, that's fashionista. That's low governance. The winners are business people driving the strategy enabled by technology. Right? So IT people have to basically say, this is what we can do with the technology. Business people have to say, well, that's what you can do technically, but how does this change our strategy? How does it change our products? How does it change the way we deliver value? This is called the digerati. These people are 6% more profitable, not revenue, profit, than these people, based on the study. Across industries, it's North America, but it would be the same here. Right? So with that, I thank you very much for spending this time with me this afternoon.
So you mentioned the portfolio, innovation portfolio. So how long do you chase a space shot? What's the average time companies rotate space shots?
Yeah. So there's a guy named Jack Welch who ran GE, and he has a quote that I like to repeat. Innovation is about failing fast and cheap. So what you don't want to do is get caught into something and then hold on to it for too long. You need to give it enough time to incubate and so on. You need to have checkpoints where you evaluate. So what you do is you set up milestones and checkpoints. And if you could reach this level of progress, then you get to the next checkpoint and so on. But you should not aimlessly just keep investing. It's my idea. I got to make it work. I got to make it work. You have to have independent checkpoints and milestones at which you're going to cut. After 90 days, if there isn't light at the end of the tunnel, cut. It's typically my measure is 90 days. You can have less or more depending, but a 3-digit number of days I think becomes dangerous. I don't mean that you're done in 90 days, but I mean that you've got a clear vision on the value creation. You should be able to do that in 90 days.
Thank you, Stephen.
Today's session chairman is Naeem Zamindar. He's the CPG founding member and chairman board of investment. Naeem, please. And this will be followed by closing remarks by Senator Mushayid Sensei.
Stefan, that was brilliant and it's very relevant to us. I've just taken this new job. I've been in the data industry, I've been in Silicon Valley, venture capitalist. So I bring that background. I've just been hired by the government to lead the board of Investment. We too have a vision for Pakistan, right? A vision where every Pakistani can live a dignified life, a life where they can reach their full potential. And I believe it's going to happen sooner rather than later. And the digital revolution and the technology revolution and disruption is going to drive that change. At the Board of Investment, we believe investments will be the key drivers for that. Investments in all these sectors is critical for the success of this happening. We are adopting, and again, the reason why I'm here is because I'm here to learn and adopt some of these ideas. We believe we have to leverage technology to be able to do our work more effectively. One of the things that we're targeting, with the feedback we've received, is that it's very hard to do business in Pakistan, right? Pakistan's ranking has deteriorated from 144 to 147. And the one thing that we are focusing on is trying to make it easier. This year, our goal is to dramatically improve that, right? And again, we're going to use technology to do so. For a simple thing like registering a new company, you require 12 different departments you have to go to. Now, through technology, through one website, and integration between 12 departments, we will be able to very shortly, inshallah, do it real time, right? It's getting there, it's happening, and inshallah, these kind of changes will make that difference. I know I don't have too much time, but I just want to emphasize that this is an important area. We want to make sure this year, and we're doing a 100-day sprint. So this year's ranking, we want it dramatic, and technology is going to be the core focus of that. Same thing, we realize that the other big opportunity that we're going after is the China opportunity, right? Collaboration with China. So we're responsible for bringing China is going to grow from a $10 trillion economy to a $40 trillion economy in the next 25 years. A $30 trillion opportunity for Pakistan. And there is a lot of interest and there's an opportunity to integrate. We have a lot of Chinese come to Pakistan, but we haven't been able to convert many of them. So what we are putting in is a lead management system, right? A way to track anybody who meets the Prime Minister or myself or anybody in the government. We start tracking them and where do they fall off, what's going wrong, and the data is going to help us figure out what do we need to fix or how do we follow up, hold people accountable, and make things happen. And lastly, we're trying to build a world-class website. And using the data that we have data in Nadra of, there are 9 million expatriates, right? Many of them have email addresses. We have that data. We have people visiting from around the world. We have that data, email addresses. So start interacting with them using newsletters, but converting them into traffic onto a website and building databases where we start actually bringing them in, right? Figuring out the messaging that will attract them back in, understand the concerns. And the way forward is leveraging technology, right? And thank you for this. This is a very insightful session, and hopefully for us, it's going to stimulate a lot of thinking and progress in this direction. And this group, we really would appreciate your support and thought process to making this success. I want to share this with you as well. So if you have ideas or suggestions to enable, and you know, there are great companies like Telenor where we are hosted, and many more over here which have to definitely be a part of this revolution. It is nothing less than a revolution. We saw that in the cellular revolution, right? From being the few 3 million fixed lines to 140 million mobile phones in just a few years. The same thing will happen to education, healthcare, energy, agriculture, right? So let's make it happen together. Thank you.
Thank you, Naeem. Before the closing remarks of Senator Mushayr and Sayyid, I'm grateful to specifically two CPGMs who are here from Karachi, Mr. Zafar Iqbal Subani and Mr. Khalid Nawar. Thank you. I request Mr. Mushayr for the closing remarks. And after his closing remarks, we will visit the facility with Irfan and followed by high tea.
Thank you very much. Good evening and Assalamu Alaikum. In the name of the Almighty, the Lord of all mankind, you've lived up to your reputation, Steve, because your presentation was excellent. This interface of data, decision making, and digital connectivity, and your accent on transparency. And in fact, you've come to Pakistan at the right time. In 2018, Naeem Zemidar just mentioned some of the points. This is the happening place for information technology. And the link digital connectivity. Naeem mentioned China, and I just like, since I'm chairing the parliamentary committee on the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, I'd just like to say a few words. And before that, I'd like to thank Asfar Hassan Saab, and of course Irfan Saab also. I think this linkage or this fusion of Norwegian quality and Pakistani creativity will do a damn good job. And I've noticed that you mentioned this office not as a corporate headquarters, but as a campus, a place for learning, for innovation, and I think that's what it reflects. Pakistan is today at the hub of amazing regional connectivity through the Belt and Road Initiative of China, of which the centerpiece is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. We have a project which will be ready by the end of this year. It's called the Fiber Optic Cable Project, $44 million worth, and which will have its submarine landing also, and which will have digital TV also, which will connect Pakistan with the region, the 70 countries which are part of this initiative in Asia, Africa, Middle East, and Europe, and parts of Latin America. So we are already there. And you mentioned also about smart meters. I think great minds think alike, because Irfan just told me that they are going to have in Karachi smart meters for K Electric, linkage of Telenor. And one statistic which he gave, which is amazing, Easy Pesa, $12 billion with millions of people utilizing that. And Pakistan today has a population of 200 million plus, 150 million people having access to telephones, 50 million having access to the internet, 3G and 3/4. And I think it's not just about the digital economy anymore. You know, this is what has changed, and this is what is connecting people. Statistics that we have with the government, by 2020, we could have an outlay of over $1 billion in Pakistan's e-commerce. So I think that I remember when I was studying in Georgetown University School of Foreign Service in Washington, D.C., and I went to Hollywood. They said the highest paid person, I asked them, who is the highest paid person in Hollywood? I asked the Warner Brothers studio. They said the highest paid person in Hollywood is the idea man. He gives an idea and the movie is a big success. So you have given us very good ideas, and I think some of the ideas which are there for the politicians also in terms of governance. Because this use of technology, the use of innovation, and the use of data. Because in our systems, and those of you who have worked in government, they're there. Where's Dr. Ismail Shah, who did a lot of good work? Dr. Sir, well done. You have, as chairman of Pakistan Telecommunication Authority, you have been a pioneer for change and for promoting this digital connectivity. I think it's very important that this transparency which Steve mentioned. Steve is here. I think you've come this time when so much is happening, and so we feel that we are in that center stage of this internet connectivity. And you talked of solar panels. The Pakistan Parliament is the first green parliament in Asia. We are already using the solar panels. And now we are trying to develop an e-parliament with each member of parliament having their own computers in front of them, so they have access to data instantly. So a lot is being done, and I feel that Telenor, Irfan Saab, you have to be part of that revolution, helping and guide the people in Islamabad and of course the people of Pakistan, and the people are ahead with ideas and issues. And in this regard, I think that a role model of this new digital connectivity is what Asfar has done with the corporate Pakistan group. Because this is something unique. It brings in corporate leaders, political leaders, media leaders, business leaders, IT people, and on one platform. And there is an exchange of information, sharing of ideas, and I think we all learn from each other. So full marks to you. So you qualify as the highest paid person in Hollywood. You came with this idea, and this idea is a success now. So ideas combined with action. Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I wish you all a happy New Year. And I wish Steve a very good stay. Please try our food also. It's finger-licking good.
Thank you, Bashai sir. I will request Irfan to please come here and present the plot to us.